All right, well, I've got a few slides to get us started, and I want to also thank Sean Hayes for being with us today. So thank you, Sean, for joining us. We'll do our introductions in just a moment, but here we are at our July Power Hour, where we are focusing on elements of a strong professional learning calendar. Excited to dig into this topic. It's obviously one that is near and dear to our hearts. I definitely recognized some names from previous Power Hour sessions, so welcome back if you have attended our previous sessions. Welcome if this is your first one, but we are here on the third Thursday of every month, and this is our space to share the latest research, practices, tools, and resources related to high-quality curriculum-aligned professional learning. As I said, that's our passion here at Rivet, and we are excited to share it with you. So we'll start by doing a couple of quick introductions. We're going to spend most of our time today talking to Sean about his approach to professional learning in his district and the work that they're doing to meet teachers and leaders. But I first just want to take a moment to introduce myself. I'm Jennifer Wells. I'm the director of the Professional Learning Partner Guide here at Rivet. Before joining Rivet, I worked on the curriculum side and also on the district side supporting curriculum implementation. So professional learning, specifically related to high quality curriculum, is really my passion in education, and I'm excited that I get to share it today with Sean. Sean, I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself to everyone.
Sure. Thank you, Jennifer. Good morning. I'm Sean Hayes. I am the Director of Teacher Development for Jefferson Parish Public Schools. And so in my day job, my title doesn't necessarily, like many educators, reflect everything I do, but I am over professional learning. I oversee 6 teacher leader groups. I oversee a lot of our instruction and curricular aspects, including materials and pilots currently. And so I have my hands in a little bit of everything, to be honest. And that PD spans teacher, leader, all across the board. And so just for the reference, Jefferson Parish is a little bit hard to tell. That is the parish that surrounds Greater New Orleans, for those who may not be familiar.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sean. And certainly because of the role that you have and all the different things that you're doing in your parish, it's one of the reasons why we're so excited to hear your perspective today. I want to start also with just a little bit about Rivet Education and the work that we're doing. So here at Rivet, our vision for K-12 education is that every educator receives the best resources and support available to provide all students with the educational opportunities they want and deserve. And so the way that we contribute to this definition and vision is really by defining high quality professional learning and creating tools and resources and services that support state and local education agencies in putting that definition into practice. And one of the ways that we have defined high quality professional learning is in this framework, which was informed by the latest research in professional learning. As you can see, our framework has 3 main components. There in the bottom, you see the overarching characteristics of high quality professional learning. These are characteristics that are consistent across all types of PL. And we're going to have a chance to really hear a little bit about them. But we're also going to get a chance to talk about the types of professional learning. So you see that in our second section here. And these are the 4 types of professional learning that are needed to support the effective use of HQIM. So really taking a look at adoption, launch for teachers, ongoing for teachers, system design, and leadership support. And so we're excited to hear about how Sean approaches the different types of professional learning as he thinks about his PL calendar. And then at the top here of the framework, you see that we have the structures. And so these are the structures that can be leveraged to provide educators with the professional learning that they want and need. So we're also excited to hear a little bit about the different structures that inform the calendar. And the framework that we just shared, this is what guides all of our work, including the Professional Learning Partner Guide, the PLPG. And so analogous to Ed Reports and what they're doing for curriculum, the PLPG really is making it easy for school and district leaders to find organizations who have proven that they provide high quality professional learning. And one of the things we'll talk about today is leveraging both internal and external partnerships. So that PLPG is a great place to go. to learn more about external partners that can support your work. And all of the organizations that are in the PLPG, they have passed our rigorous selection process, which is informed by our framework. So that being said, I really want to take some time now to focus in on our conversation with Sean. We're going to take some time today to focus on the types of professional learning and how district leaders can take them into account when planning for the upcoming school year. So as I mentioned, we have adoption, launch, ongoing for teachers, system design, and leadership support. So let's go ahead and get started. I'll stop sharing my screen now. Well, again, thank you, Sean, so much for joining us today. Excited to dig in with you. You mentioned that Jefferson Parish is the parish that surrounds New Orleans, but I'd love it if we could actually start by just setting the stage for us about Jefferson Parish. Tell us a little bit about it and how that can sort of give us some context.
Sure. And I do apologize. Some of you probably saw my lights have gone out, and so I can't get them back on. But anyways, well, onward and upward, right? So yeah, Jefferson Parish is one of the most unique places I've ever lived. So a little bit of context for our educators on the call. I have had the privilege of working in 3 different states in education, and some of the districts that have some of the greatest reform movement going on as well, such as Shelby County in Tennessee. I've been in Ohio, and now I'm here in Louisiana. I've been in 2 parishes in Louisiana. But Jefferson Parish is by far the most diverse district I've ever been in, and it truly meets that. And so in our district, we have about 50,000 students, which is big in Louisiana for such a small state. We have about 49 languages being spoken. Just over the past 5 years, we've almost doubled our ESL population. So 20% of our district is classified as English language learners, 20% are students with special needs. And our demographic is unique and is true to this area, though, in that we serve a population that many still perceive is actually, of course, because of our educator force, which we're working to diversify it, is largely white, but it is not. We have a very unique makeup that is balanced, but is transitioning. So to date, we have about 38% of our students come from Hispanic descent. We have about 31% at the African American. We have about 24% Caucasian, and then a mix of the others. Everything in our district must be produced in 4 languages. Especially dissemination. Of course, not all curricular materials, but when available, we do produce those in Spanish and English, including assessments as well when necessary.
Excellent. Thank you. That's definitely helpful. Well, our focus for today, as we all know, is really about professional learning. So I want to go ahead and just get right to it. And I'd love to start by just hearing a little bit about your professional learning planning process, what it looks like. So a little bit about who's involved, how you approach planning for the upcoming year, and then also thinking about how you assess and modify plans as needed.
Yeah, so I want to lead by, with everyone on the call, I am experienced, I am no expert. And so this has been an experiment. I think that's very important why I lead with that, because the way we approach professional learning in Jefferson Parish is very experimentational. And that is intentional by design, because we don't like to pigeonhole ourselves into inaction when there needs to be action immediately. I always like to say, kids can't wait for adults to quit being petty, or to wait. And so we have to be proactive, but also be willing to be reactive at the cost of not overstraining, overworking our leaders, our teachers, or even our students. And so when we're looking at PD, we start long before the next school year starts. So we're talking December of the prior school year, or January, we're already into the next school year. And so when we look at that, we are looking at historical data. We're looking at data across networks, schools, demographics of students, ethnicity, special populations, and we're trying to come up with where we're seeing those gaps. We're also using observational data as well. And so we always start there. We start with what our base PD is going to be for leaders. I will talk about teachers later, but I know, Jennifer, in conversations, we have a little bit of a unique approach as to why I'm not mentioning teachers right away.
Yeah.
And so I will say that I'll leave that later, but we start with that, and we start to construct our plan for what leaders are going to need to support learning for their campuses in a district this size. That process is ongoing even into the spring as we're acquiring more data and more hot spots and points, and then we formulate that plan. We have a lot of different base offerings of things, of general things, but we focus most of our professional learning around three things: content, curriculum, and assessment. We like to make sure it's a very cohesive plan that everything speaks to that. And so we design that learning around what our moves and our metrics are going to be, which have been set by our chief as hot spots. And so that's how we kind of plan what's going on. Now, I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole, but planning for an adoption or an implementation adds a whole nother layer of complexity, which I'll speak to when Jennifer thinks is the right time.
Yeah, that's helpful to sort of hear that context. And yes, I mean, we could probably spend an hour talking about each of the types of professional learning. But for me, I think one of the things that I really appreciate in the conversations that I've had with you and in hearing about your work is really sort of understanding that professional learning, it's not one and done. It's not teachers had this, PL, or leaders had this PL last year, so great, we can check it off our list. But you all are a very large parish. You mentioned that you've got a diverse student population. I imagine you also have a wide variety of educator needs as well, and thinking about that in your professional learning. So I'd love to hear a little bit about, how do you approach designing your professional learning calendar? So if we're thinking back to last December, as you're getting ready to launch this school year, what are you thinking about in terms of being able to meet so many different educator needs?
So I think the way we approach it is we have a very balanced model that I'm going to give credit to who it came from, which is the National Institute for Excellence in Teaching. We follow their teacher learning progression. It's called the teacher learning progression, but it can be used for anybody in any context. And so we focus very holistically around what we know makes effective classroom instruction. And so it's centered first and foremost on our three big rocks. I've talked about that as a district. We have three very key lever focuses that we know move the needle for kids. And so when we're talking about the three big rocks, we're talking about those things in our district that we are holistically always looking at as what we do. So number one is implementing a high quality curriculum with fidelity. So we have a lot of our PD around that. In Louisiana, you cannot even get state funding without having high quality curricula across the board. That's how we were a leader in that area at one point. We value job embedded professional development. The one thing I'm going to espouse, that if you take any nugget from this, you cannot PD your district from the central office. I'm going to say it again. You cannot PD your district from the central office. No matter how effective you believe your PL is at that level, it's not as effective as you think it is. Research actually backs that only about 10% of what is learned in a PD outside of context on your campus with your peers and your colleagues in the work, only 10% gets back to campus and only about 5% actually gets implemented. And it's almost impossible to monitor, may not be the right word, but to see that it's actually happening and to measure that impact for schools and a district its size. And so we value as our second big rock, job embedded professional development. What that means, that's our clusters. So we are a TAP district, an IET TAP district wide. A cluster would be the equivalent of a PLC, where we are only concerned with looking at student work, planning, and assessment. That's all we're doing constantly, cyclically. That's where a lot of our work is. And of course, we use walkthrough observation and data to kind of guide that work. And so back to the planning of how we plan, I look at it in 5 pockets. We are a student first district. We don't just say that by saying it, we show it in actions too. And so when we're planning PL, we're looking at 5 strands. We're looking at the what, the why, the how. We're looking at emerging differentiation and for whom. And so we take that very seriously. While it's designed for teachers, we look at that at the leader level. We even look at, of course, at the student level. And so to break it down, as we're looking at it from teacher PL, we're looking at the what as the content, which is the driver. We're looking at the why is why we're doing it. What's the vessel as well that we're doing it with, to support those content standards. Then we progress to the how, and that's the pedagogy, of course, the art of teaching. We know those 3 things, if teachers can master it at a proficient level, student results will increase. There's empirical research and data that shows those 3 things will move the needle for kids. Then you move into those levels of how can we differentiate and move the needle for those kids who are unique learners, whether they're a student that may have a disability or a student that speaks another language or a student that has whatever challenges it may be. So looking at that differentiation, also how that built-in acceleration works. And then of course, we look at the highest level, which is student-led learning for whom. And so we're trying to gauge to get to those levels. But one trap I don't want folks to leave with and to get caught is this. While we look at our PL and we say, okay, we're looking constantly at the data, how our school's moving, how our educators moving, how is this moving? We're very clear to make sure we're offering a wide variety. So yes, we may repeat some things year on, year out. If it's positive, of course, you have new teachers come in, but our goal is to be moving people through those levels to get teachers, leaders, whoever need to where they need to be. And that's kind of the approach we take with that design.
Yeah, that's super helpful. And I think that gives us a really good sense of what's happening now. Now, at the beginning of the call, you mentioned your experience, but you're not expert, and that you've been in Jefferson Parish for 5 years. And as you were talking about how everything is grounded in student work, that really makes me think about, one of the great things about looking at student work is you can learn from what's working, what's not working. So I want us to do a little bit of that. What are some of the lessons that you've learned in 5 years of designing a PL calendar and working to meet the needs of teachers? What are some things you've done in the past that you're not doing anymore? What are some things that you're like, oh, this really works, we're going to keep doing it?
So one of my greatest triumphs and us as a district was something we tried. So when we came to this parish, as lovely as it is, there were many different curricula, many different things happening that couldn't be supported. And so we had to make decisions out of necessity that were just to do at the time to get everybody on the right page and get it back on board, including we overhauled all four core curriculum at one time, mind you. And so we designed learning tracks with outside professional partners to support the work. But what they did is we were trying to start at the time building capacity. And so the one thing I mentioned about not being able to PD all your teachers is because it's not possible. We have a very small central office. We don't even have the largest central office, and we're the largest in the state, and we're the largest district in the state because we put all of our ducks where they need to be on the ground boots. So before I get too far down the pigeonhole, I do want to acknowledge that the way we support this work now has taken 5 years to get to this point, and we're still not there. We decided that we were going to make sure that our values are reflected in our pocketbook and our budget and in the actions we take. And so one of the biggest actions we took is that we had a district that had very little support. There was no leadership development. There was no teacher leader development. So in 4 years, I'm not counting this coming year, we went from 0 teacher leaders and an investment of 0, obviously, to now we invest in the training, the consistent growth and cyclical training. We use these people to lead PD in pockets and with networks and with core groups of educators. We've gone from 0 to 600 teacher leaders, trained across different roles, 6 different roles now that we target, and we build them along a trajectory. And they're the ones who are the boots on the ground. So when we're talking PD at the district level, we're providing PD for our teacher leaders and our building leaders, because they're the ones that are going to take back, implement, monitor, and support, because that's the way it's going to be able to work. So far, we've had mixed results, I'm being honest, but it's because we're still in a transitional phase. We started with 1 teacher leader program my first year, which had 58 people. We added a second in my second year, and it went to 200. And then the next year, we added 2 more. And then the following year, we added 2 more. So it's been a process. And so we're still featuring some of those pains as we're moving forward. But in that plan, we started with a district-wide PD professional development where we broke teachers into content and grade specific bands. Now not bands, content and grade level specific cohorts. It was our greatest triumph, but our biggest disaster at the same time. And the disaster has nothing to do with what we did. The disaster was COVID. And so that made us think, but it also at the same time was a silver lining. It was not going to be sustainable long term. It was a great triumph. I mean, can you imagine? I just literally 3,600 teachers into unique cohorts. It was a beautiful process. Teachers learning from teachers, which is what we want. That model has still progressed with our teacher leaders, but it just wasn't going to work. And so we're still trying to grapple with how we can build that back in, because we do want to also give time for PL to be around the things that we take for granted, like additional planning and support in planning, support in curriculum implementation, support in understanding content better. And so we've had to shift because of COVID, but we're shifting for the better. And so I have the support of my upper leadership now that we are transitioning away from trying to just do everything, which this summer has been kind of a breaking summer for us, to being very intentional around who we are PDing, as I'm calling it, and what the expectation is around what their role is, to make sure it's being implemented through the cluster process. You have to have structures and systems. No matter how small your district is, if the systems and structures are not sustainable, it's going to break at some point.
Yeah, this is super helpful. I have to say, there are so many follow-up questions I have of like, oh, I want to learn more about this and that. But one thing I also just want to take a moment and note is, certainly for everyone who is joining us today, if Sean's mentioning anything and you would like to hear more about it, or you've got a great follow-up question, go ahead and drop it into the chat or drop it into the Q&A. We're monitoring them so we can make sure that we ask them. So Sean, one of the things that I want to ask you about with that evolution of the PD plan, you mentioned, you started out with 0 teacher leaders. You've obviously grown that significantly. You mentioned you were, 4 years ago, you were doing massive curriculum adoption. You were bringing in external providers for that. I'd love to hear a little bit about your decision-making process around, you mentioned you can't PD from the central office. How do you decide when you're thinking about your teacher and leader needs? How do you decide this is something that we can do externally versus internally? And then what does it sort of look like, especially if it is external, to make sure that, the vision that you have and the reason why you've engaged an external partner, that reality really comes to life?
Yeah, so when we're deciding with partners, in our district, it's big on capacity. We're building capacity. There was a capacity that was not there. I'm not afraid to say it. Most of the people here who were here before me are not afraid to say it either. There was no investment in central or school leader capacity to carry out this work. And so they relied a lot on vendor, or we'll say curriculum vendor PD. And so, I'm not going to always be popular, but some of that PD is not necessarily always meeting the needs. It's very cookie cutter. And so it's a balance of where we are as a district. And so we have content coordinators at the district level that their job is to engage, support, and lead PD. So that is very helpful. A lot of it also has to do with the scaling of it. So if it's too large for something that we can handle from central, or something that we think is going to be a long-term plan, we like to go ahead and include vendor partners. We typically only do that with adoptions at this point and that long-term support, because we feel confident in the capacity we've grown through our pedagogical practices with, I'll just use it, an IET, we're an IET district. And then also we had a lot of already built-in things that while the structure of support wasn't there, we've built it with these teacher leaders that we have enough of a grounding and being able to carry this work on our own. Because like I said earlier, you can bring the vendor in and that's fine. But folks are looking for the wow. When it's your central office, your building leaders, and we are all sitting boots on the ground with teachers, leaders, co-teaching, practicing, gathering data, having that talk, you're still going to get more out of that when it's imperfect than you will out of a perfect tailored PD coming from, I'm just going to make Hoffman Mifflin, or coming from, just to make so we can separate the two. But we have had a lot of great success in how we leverage partners to support the work. So one example I'll give you, I'm not afraid to say who our partners are. We use the School Kit Group. They were instrumental in leading our content leader fellow work. That's the group that we task with helping us to support all levels of teachers and leaders across the district. And yes, when I say teacher leaders, sometimes that means teacher leaders are PDing principals, and that's okay because principals have a lot on their plate. We've had a lot of success, and what I love about that process is in Jefferson Parish, we do not partner with anybody that is not willing to do a couple of things. Number one, meet us where we're at and aspire to our goals, because at the end of the day, we are in control. We are in charge. It's our budget, it's our students, it's our priorities. Never bend to the priorities or the whims of what, and this rarely happens. So if we have any vendors on the call, please, this rarely happens, but it does. Don't bend to the whim. Don't bend to cookie cutter, out of the box tailored PD. Also, don't be afraid to follow up with those partners. Because when I'm not happy, they know it. Whether it be our strongest partners or a vendor partner who we're using temporarily, have a voice. You're paying for a product and you're paying for a result at the same time. And so I have a close watch and connection to the money as well. And so I know everything that's happening in the paradigm, but also have that partner that's willing to sit down with you and build that plan. They have expertise for a reason. So someone like the School Kit Group is a great example. They have extensive expertise in multiple curricula, multiple either best pedagogical practices. They have experience in different of the evaluative natures of things. And so they can see the piece holistically. What helped us with them is that they were also working with the LDOE. So we were able to take what the LDOE was doing cookie cutter in a good way, though, nothing against what the LDOE did. It was appropriate for the time. And we were already a year or two ahead of what the LDOE wanted us to do. And so School Kit was able to help us map that out around our curricula. They've been such a strong vendor partner that because of the relationship and the trust and approach that we have and the feedback from teacher leaders and principals, we have remained in partnership, and we oftentimes have now expanded that partnership to support in some very specific areas that we cannot always get to.
Yeah. That's super helpful. We've got some questions coming in. So I'm actually going to pivot to Gail's question because I think it's pretty timely. But Gail is saying it feels like the biggest problem is time and everyone being stretched too thin and trying to do too much. And so how have you found ways to eliminate and focus the work?
That's a great question, Gail. Thank you for that question. That is true. It's something we deal with every day, especially right now. I don't know where everybody is from, but I want to add this to you. So we have a pandemic. We have the usual stresses of teaching. Now I want you to add in losing roofs on 30 schools. We are a hurricane impacted district last year. And so we have that constant threat to add as well. Number one, you have to have a grounded vision that everybody's bought into. Is it possible for everybody to buy into it? No, you're never going to. I've had to learn that at my young age. Yes, I'm probably as young as you think I am, everybody. But it's been a little bit of a baptism by fire over the years. And so we are stretched thin, but also it's a matter of district leadership really focusing on what the priorities are. If you recall, I mentioned those three levers. Our educators know and leaders know those are the three things we're looking at. Anything else you add in is either fluff or you're doing it on your own because you believe it, which we give autonomy to principals, but we always go back to what is our focus and purpose because the data says we need to go there. Once you get there and you get your principals on board there, that's what helps. We have a network structure. And so we have kind of these small pods of families that we have with smaller subset of schools that we support and work with. And so we've built that trust. And yeah, it takes a lot of hard conversations. But if you're focused on the right things, so the things I mentioned before, the teacher learning progression, which is just a good progression for learning in general, not a bunch of PD, just a PD, but really focused on the data and the target, and then realistic goals of what implementation and that support should look like. Because at times what I feel is when I go into a classroom and I want to co-teach or just watch or model with a teacher, they'll be very honest with me because that rapport has been built. And then I come back and say, okay, so let's separate what the central office says or this versus what the reality is of what we expect from you as a teacher. And oftentimes when I have those conversations or as a network, we come to an understanding, but we do need to do a better job, Gail. We have to do a better job of from the central office and from school leadership and not adding things unnecessarily to the plate. Because are you doing it for compliance? Or are you doing it for commitment? And so we have had a big compliance issue in this district. Look, there are only certain things that are meant to be compliant in a district. We are learning and molding human beings. Your budget is compliant. Your paperwork is compliant. Teaching and learning is not compliant. As long as you're not harming kids, we should be making every effort possible. I'll give you one example. I bet you a lot of folks on here still have their teachers doing lesson plans. We don't mandate lesson plans from our central office. There is no format. There is no requirement. What we require is principals to have their own systems in place to ensure that teachers are planning effectively. But an old lesson plan template is not going to make you effective in implementing a high quality curriculum. Keep in mind, a high quality curriculum has all the pieces with you already there. So why would I take the time away from teachers when teachers should be diving into the why of that curriculum, the content and standards, and actually planning what their implementation is going to look like. And then once they're getting that student work, they bring it back to cluster or with their teachers. Okay, this didn't work today. So what? What are we going to do to make it work tomorrow? What's the data telling us? Keeping it simple. We still struggle with it, even from the PL side, because some people are like, I don't get it. This is so simple. And I always tell them, because it's supposed to be. Teaching is the easiest profession in theory. It is not the easiest profession in practice. That's what makes us the hardest profession there is.
Yeah, that is super interesting. Again, I feel like there's, 7,000 follow-up questions I can ask about that. So you mentioned that you've got the clusters happening. You've built some internal capacity. You had to have some hard conversations. And I imagine that's really too, if I'm thinking about my experience, we've all sort of experienced what I call, for lack of a better term, the smorgasbord of PL. So even when it is, oh, we're going to have, small groups of people leading things, can you give us some pointers on how can we make sure that we are finding that balance between it doesn't become smorgasbord of PL and, I'm suddenly very interested in one thing and I want to pivot my PD to that, but at the same time, still maintaining that, I know in previous conversations we've had that flexibility to be able to be responsive to teacher needs. How do you balance that?
It's tough. That's the easy. But like I said, the more we've streamlined, our calendar has shrunk. And so people actually don't realize that we're offering actually more PD than we ever have. It just looks smaller because we're not offering hit or miss things. We had so many contracts in this district, Jennifer. It was nauseating. All our PD was outsourced. The amount of money we spent on things and programs, like you mentioned. Tell you right now, another thing, quit investing in things. The only thing you need is the high quality instructional materials. That's all you need. And so we're trying to build that honus because our PD is so focused in that, teachers oftentimes are looking for that aha. We're not giving them that aha. I don't want you to leave a PD and say, I want you to leave and say, oh, oh, it's been there all along, or, oh, it's right there. Because we don't want teachers, the more teachers have to go out and search, we're not meeting our purpose. And so we do face that balance of trying to make sure that they understand, but we're not offering a bunch of extra fluff. What we offer is very targeted. We have a couple we have all content curricular PD all summer. That's it. And assessment. The only outside things we offer are things specific to the needs that we have to meet as a TAP district, like the NIET focus, some of our state initiatives. And we offer a couple hit or miss programs that we know are quality. For example, we actually have 2 tier 1 math curricula at the same time. But we are Eureka Math District for our core curricula, but we use Zearn. We don't use it as a full curriculum though, even though it is a full tier 1 curriculum, we use it as a supplemental. And so we offer nothing but the best for our district. And so it's easier to balance when you know that what you're putting in front of kids and educators is research-based, it's proven, and it's effective if you give it the time to marinate and evolve. And that's something very important is you have to be willing to give yourselves time. The amount of heat that I take in a day or in a year, it's stressful. But we have bought in with our leaders. And so when you're implementing PL, I'm imploring a lot of you, I hope this isn't all over the place, but please consider your leaders first. We've had that challenge first and foremost. I knew it was a problem 5 years ago, but it was just where we were at in this fire blazing needing to move.
Yeah.
You have to think about your leaders. And this is nothing about leadership's shortcomings. This is about the idea that some of our administrators, think about this, even if you're in your 17th year of education, right? Depending on your state, you're only 5 to 10 years into the reform era. And some of them have not taught these tier 1 curricula or know how to support. And so when I'm talking about leaders, I'm also talking about teacher leaders and your district your administration. It's all levels of leadership, but we often forget and we go straight to the teachers. The teachers will fail if the principals cannot at a minimum level support the work that's happening. And so when you're building your PL plan, I'm going to remember this for the next time we go in for an adoption, which is coming soon as well, is really concerning that leader focus and how we build their capacity as high as we can while acknowledging that they have a bevy of things on their plate. I probably went off the cuff, so please repeat, Jennifer, if I need to go in a different direction.
I think you asked some great things. So I'm going to ask two hopefully quick clarifying questions because we've got
Okay.
some more questions coming in and this is getting exciting. One, I know we don't have everybody on this call. We've got a fair number of Louisiana people, but not everybody. So can you just quickly define for us tier one? I know that's in Louisiana. What does that
Tier one would be high quality instructional materials. So high quality instructional materials are vetted by, of course, Ed Reports, but Louisiana, we also tier. So I always like to say this, and I get to say this because I'm not from Louisiana. So my Louisiana educators on here, I'm a product of the state of Ohio. I've lived in 7 states. And so I have a bevy, but it's easy to look at Louisiana and say, oh, we're 46 or 47th, but I'm going to tell you right now, and my Louisiana educators, thumbs up, whatever you want to do. We have some of the most progressive. The word reform is often taken the wrong way, but we'll just call it reforms what it is in the country. And I've been in Tennessee, which has had drastic gains and reforms as well. Louisiana can hold its own. So I always say don't judge a book by its cover. But yeah, high quality instructional materials and tier one are the same thing. And so as you're looking at Ed Reports or Louisiana's own vetting process, they've been rated as the highest quality by a number of experts, we'll say.
Excellent. Well, I think in answering that question, you also answered the other question I have, which was, where do you go for HQIM? And it sounds like you've got your resources of Ed Reports and then Louisiana supporting that as well. Is there anything else that you take into account as you mentioned you're about to go into some adoptions? Do you have other quick pointers of here's what I do to make sure it is HQIM?
Oh yeah, we definitely vet everything ourselves. We trust a lot with Ed Reports. I'm not afraid to say it. I have reviewed for Ed Reports at one time, and I've also reviewed for the LDOE. And so we're very proud of that work, but it is a stringent process. And so I've done both. So I have a very unique lens, but even the Louisiana process is every bit as stringent. And I want to give credit because there is somebody on the call who was, I'm not going to name their name, but who was very instrumental in leading that work. And I appreciate her for doing that, even though she is no longer directly with us in the LDOE. But she was instrumental in that work. And it's very powerful stuff. That work is what gave me a different lens of what I look for. I also look for, so we oftentimes, another resource that I would use or look at is they don't produce work in this arena as much. Student Achievement Partners is a good one. They offer a lot of resources like I've used their, help me out, their pilot kind of guide and what we're looking for and how to look for in different curricula. So it's kind of evolved with what you look for in tier one or high quality instructional materials. And so that's been very helpful as well. But it takes a lot of planning. It takes a lot of intentionality. But guess what? It's also a lot of fun because if you frame it the right way, like we are, I think we are right now with our teachers and our leaders, we are so excited because when you're piloting high quality instructional materials across the board, it doesn't matter what you're piloting. It's still fun because the results should still carry through it. So there's less trepidation of the change because each HQIM brings something different to the table. But at the end of the day, if you're really engaged in content standards, it's just like getting it's like you love this favorite outfit, but this outfit's cooler. So let's go to this outfit and see. But it's not totally different. It's still a shirt or it's still a dress or it's still a pair of pants. And so that's the fun in it.
That's awesome. Thanks. I just want to take a quick moment. I'm going to hop to some questions that I see coming in. Because we're getting a lot, which is great. Please keep asking them. If you are not taking a look at the chat, we've had Litzy drop in a couple of helpful links, as well as Tracy, one of our participants. So make sure that you're checking them out. And certainly if there are other helpful links, we welcome them. So we have a question from Mariana, which is, how do you balance teacher comfort and facility with an HQIM with the tendency to use an HQIM as a supplement or as a quote add-on to the things that they like to do, which that resonates with me having, I know done that as a teacher, but in supporting curriculum implementation, same thing. So, you mentioned somebody has 17 years of experience. So they've picked up a lot of things that work over the years. So how do you help them, use the HQIM and balance that, but also they're used to a particular way of teaching?
Yeah. Kid gloves. I'll lead with that. Kid gloves. you want to respect and value what that teacher brings. Experience has a place. And so there are things that have worked. But as assessment changes, as the expectation changes, that's what's really been the struggle for us. The expectations have changed and making sure they understand that why. What I learned in fourth grade is now being learned in second grade here. And so, that shift has occurred, and it hasn't been too long ago in Louisiana where that shift has changed. But the easiest way is to bring them into the process, make them understand the why, make them see the why, model the why, and not saying that what they're doing is incorrect. Don't ever go in and say, oh, no, because we want to value, because the teacher may be still getting results for kids. But you also have to question, are those results going to be short term? And then once they leave you long term, is that going to carry on to the next teacher? And so high quality instructional materials ensure that there's a cohesive trajectory of learning that's happening no matter where you're at. And so that is one of the positives. And also that student work, because our goal is to push students. It's not just to meet the standard, it's to push students beyond that standard if we can. And so it's very important that we don't lose sight of that. So let the student work guide. One of the easiest ways, and this sounds terrible, but using that cluster time is when you're comparing student work across teachers and grade levels. And oftentimes you're going to see the teachers who are engaged 100% holistically using the high quality instructional materials, and they understand the why, the design, and that it has every feature that you could ever need in it. Oftentimes that teacher starts to latch on because the results are usually much better. There are your outliers, but there are also opportunities for conversation in that. There's always going to be an opportunity for that. If there's discomfort from the teacher, you have to stand back and question where that discomfort comes from. Is it a lack of, did the teacher not jump in intentionally? Or maybe did we not as a district or a school properly PD them, and also support them over time? That's where a lot of it comes in. If they're not getting the proper support, they're never going to jump in holistically to it. And so, but you're always going to have those teachers, Mariana, that are going to bring in extra stuff. The question I would beg to you is, are they though using the high quality instructional materials as their key lever? And is what you also have to analyze what they're bringing in, because there are sometimes things they're bringing in that may actually be high quality instructional aligned stuff. But my number one advice to you is, if it's coming from teacher paid teacher, it's probably not high quality instructional materials. I'm sorry. I want teachers to make money too, but it's usually not.
Yeah, so. I totally understand. One of the things I'm sort of curious to go back to, you mentioned that in your PL calendar, you actually now have less PL time. So I think about when I started teaching, there was the district-wide calendar, and there was usually, 2 or 3 days before school started. And then if we were lucky, 2 or 3 days during the school year that were PD days. And that was the PD that I got. And I have certainly seen from, when I left the classroom and my work supporting curriculum implementation, there has been an evolution, and we're not as much sort of seeing here's the day on the calendar, check, PD plan is done. You mentioned you don't have as much time on the calendar, but teachers are receiving more PD. You've mentioned cluster time. I wonder if you can just sort of give us a little bit more detail around that. When are teachers and leaders experiencing PL, and how much are they getting throughout the year?
Yeah, so it's hard because when you can't see it in front of you, you assume that it's not happening. But I go back to my other statement. The most authentic PL you can have is when you pull the student work, you pull the student data, and you do it in live time. Everything else is adding to a toolbox that you hope impacts. But I'll give you a little bit of a shell. So all 6 of my teacher leader groups receive a specific trajectory of learning. All of it is intertwined between, coaching and leading student-centered conversation with teachers, along with content, curriculum, and assessment. We are very consistent. You'll see the same graphics in all of our PD. You'll see the same 3 big rocks, the same trick. We're all on the same page. We spend all of our summer, the majority, PLing those people. And so those people are expected. We don't always make it mandatory, but they are expected. They know that in the role. We don't have many issues with that. They know it's part of their role. If they have a vacation or something planned, I can't stop you. But we also make, adjustments to try and make sure it's either offered again, or we record it, or we do something. We do follow up as network teams. We do follow up to see the implementation, to see how it's impacting students. If it didn't work, we are in schools daily. So I know when you think of central office people, you say, oh, we're in the ivory tower. I'm in schools every single day, all day long. The only day that we are allowed to be at central office is on Fridays when we have meetings where we are actually planning for the support for schools in that next week. So
Yeah.
during the school year, we do very similar. So this next school year, we're tightening it up even more. We center on 3 areas of support. Leader PD, which is done through district-led clusters, which is based on the data in each network. So each network could be a little different. Some there will be commonalities that principals and master teachers take back. Then we have what's called our Content Leader Fellow and Master Teacher PD series, which is all based around our moves and metrics and our trajectory, and also heavily engaged in acceleration continued this year. And then we have our New Teacher PD series. That's the one area where we try and balance, because right now we're trying to do a lot of experimentation as to what the district balance for New Teacher Professional Learning is versus what the school's expectation is. On a side note, we just started our own alt cert in the district as well, which, as you can guess, I'm also over. So we have a whole bunch of things going on, which are great, and trying to align those together, which is very important. So New Teacher is kind of our new venture right now. Another form of PD that you never would guess, and this is not traditional, but it's effective, is we use our teacher leaders to PD other teachers.
Excellent. Tell us a little more about that. How are they PDing other teachers?
It takes a lot of trust, and it's not great because it's a capacity building tool. So we've invested in them and trained them in very basic things. They've proven they're effective teachers, but leading PD is hard. I mean, it just is. And so we utilize our district content team as their opportunity to coach and build their level to coach and support the next level. And so we work with them, we plan, we design, we question, we challenge, we watch them model portions of it, we lead with them. And so we've done that to where we've actually given away a lot of our professional learning to our teacher leaders to lead so that we can expand our reach, especially to new teacher support where we're a little stretched thin with the other areas that we support. That's been one of our biggest levers, and we've had a lot of positive feedback. It's never perfect, but guess what? It really is perfect. That's as perfect as it gets. It's genuine, it's authentic from people that are in the classrooms still, or the closest to the classroom you can get while being outside of it. And so during the summer, that's about it. For new teacher support, the one thing I didn't mention, we do a week-long summit for new teachers. But once again, we don't do the fluff. I mean, there's a lot of school systems, there's a lot of merit that bring them into these grandiose introductory stuff. Yeah, our HR department does a 1 day. We do 5 days, hard as you can go into content, curriculum, and assessment, so that when our teachers leave that week, they can't go to everything, of course, because like in K2, they're going to teach all 4 subjects, but usually at least in 2 subjects in classroom management, they're leaving with a classroom management plan. They're leaving with usually a unit, their first unit unpacked, which is important. And they're leaving with a couple of lessons already planned and seeing model lessons ready to go. And then what we'll do is we'll have the master teachers at schools follow up, because we could never follow up with that volume. But that cluster process, like you said as well, is so critical. And right now we're trying to figure out what that paradigm is. So the expectation is that what's being learned from Leader PD, from the CLF MT series, and from master teacher support and new teacher support, that's what's being put into classrooms. But again, we are only a cog in the wheel. So we have the district level support, but we also have to be cognizant that each of our schools is required to have a long range plan for the year. And they're required to have short-term cycle goals that are fluid and flexible based on student need and student data.
Yeah, that's super helpful. We've got about 10 minutes left. I'd love to, before we do our wrap up, see if we can answer a couple of questions. So if you still have questions, please send them in. We've got one from Jennifer. How does the district use student data to reveal a causal relationship between the specific professional learning they engage in, are provided, and improved instructional practice?
That's an easy question. We don't.
Okay.
And I'm gonna clarify. Of course, that's a loaded response. We don't, because you cannot correlate. That correlation would be so statistically tedious in what it would happen that there would be no way to actually link causality, to be very honest with you, Jennifer. And so what we do, though, is what we can see in the qualitative quantitative data is that's why we don't PD teachers anymore. It's a big part of it. Because there's no amount of data that I can see. I can qualitatively see if they're implementing it, if it's having impact on student results. What I can do is provide the effective PD based on the data we have, with support of principals and teacher leaders who usually know and are brought into the planning process around this. But they know the shortcomings, and they know we're looking at everything they're looking at. We look at their data all day, every day,
Yeah.
while we're supporting as well as their pedagogical practice and their observational data. And so what we can do though is we can monitor the transfer of learning to clusters and ILTs and that transfer to the classroom. We rely on the schools and we pocket it into networks and us being in the schools to see what the impact on learning is and to see if it was a result of that learning, because we expect to see that learning happening in schools. It's kind of like the ultimate field test. We love field testing because that's what it is. If all of education, I mean, it should be like science almost. That's how I view PL, like science. It's theoretical. It's meant to be just proven. And so that's what we want. We also want our educator, we want to see things fail too, because just because research says it works doesn't mean it's going to work for the population of kids that are in front of you. So long story short, Jennifer, we can't do it from 501. We have structures and processes that make sure it gets down to the school level, and that school level data becomes the ownership of what's working and what is not working.
Mm-hmm. That is really helpful. It sounds like really what you're getting at is there are leading indicators. There's, important things to measure before student achievement. So I know, for example, the instructional practice guide was dropped into the chat. That's one thing that you can use. So while you might not be able to do that direct correlation, you can still see, is there growth happening? Is what we're doing work this?
I will say this too, it's been difficult in the transition. I've had two superintendents, I've had a multitude. But we have remained consistent in JP, which has been very helpful. It's helped us to alleviate, like we're getting to a point, I think, where we're actually, for such a large district, we are transitioning to a point of kind of peace and tranquility in some areas. But I will say this too, we are only one of 20 districts that grew during the pandemic. So I like to say our educators are doing something right. We didn't grow a lot, but we grew.
And so student size. So you had that's great. Mm-hmm. Excellent. I see, Gail, you've got a note. You'd love a transcript of this so you could reread it and think through some more of it. I will see what we can do about that transcript. Again, we will share the recording. We've got just a few moments left. So I'm actually going to go back to share my screen to just do a little bit of wrap up. I feel like we could probably spend another 3 hours, but want to be respectful, Sean, of your time and of course, all of our participants' time as well. So, I want to just point out some calls to action. Sean gave us a lot of great helpful pointers and tips, and just thank you for being so transparent in your experience and what you're doing. I think one of the things that I want to make sure that we leave with is that thinking about that PL calendar, responsive to teacher and educator needs, as I know you've spoken to. You talked about how it leverages internal and external expertise and what that relationship looks like, working with both your internal people so that you're not ending up with that sort of smorgasbord of PD, but also external so that you can make sure that is really meeting your needs. And of course, you said again and again, content, curriculum, you mentioned assessment, which I didn't put in here, but that your teachers are really working in those clusters and getting a chance to collaborate with each other. So of course, as we think about our PL calendars, wanting to think about how we can prioritize those opportunities for content and curriculum specific collaboration. I love how you just highlighted what you're doing with your new teachers that first week of school. And it's not, 5 days of logistics or 4 days of logistics and, oh yeah, here's your curriculum. It's let's really spend some time in that. I also just want to point out a few ways that we at Rivet can help support this work and are currently supporting this work. As I mentioned, we're obsessed with professional learning. So I just want to think about, give you a chance to think about what that looks like. As we mentioned, we of course have the PLPG. So here's where you can find those external partners that can help you really build out your PL and meet the needs. Everybody in the PLPG has met our bar for quality. We also encourage you, if you're a school or system leader, to reach out to us about a professional learning diagnostic. We're really happy to help you think about some customized ways that you can improve school or district professional learning plans and systems. And then coming soon, we will also have Rivet Connect, which as a school or district leader is really going to help get you support for posting RFPs, crafting RFPs, and other service requests so that you can procure that high quality instructional materials and professional learning. As Sean mentioned, those materials are really at the core of it as well. And then, of course, I know we've got some state education leaders on here as well. So just want to also let you know that at Rivet, we do strategic consulting services. So we can help you think about how you scale adoption and implementation of those high quality instructional materials. We also can do state-specific professional learning partner guides. So similar to our national PLPG, we can help you create and curate one for your state. And then, of course, Rivet Connect that will be launching in late August will also provide that RFP support. Don't worry, there'll be more details about that coming out as we get closer to that. And then, of course, I also know that we've got some of our professional learning organizations on here as well. So I know we've got some who are already featured in our PLPG. Fantastic. If you are a professional learning organization and you are not yet in our PLPG, we encourage you to apply. Our application will officially open on August 25th, but we've got the application overview available, as well as the scoring and evidence guide. We will share all of these slides. So everything that you see in here that is linked, don't worry, you'll be getting those links. And you are also welcome to reach out to me, jennifer.wells@riveteducation.org, with any questions about that. As I mentioned at the start of this is part of our monthly professional learning power hour series. So we'll have one coming up the third Thursday in August, where one of our co-founders, Annie Morrison, will sit down with Sarah Stocker, the Director of Instruction with Mount Horeb Area School District, to discuss her district's innovative approach to launching Bridgets and their invaluable partnership with CISA 2. If you are on our email list, then you saw that we released the case study yesterday. So this will be a chance to gain some more insight there. We encourage you to register for this. And of course, we'll make sure that we end with some resources for you all. So we'll make sure that you get all of these. We are at our time. I just want to say thank you again so much, Sean, for just being so open and honest with us, for entertaining all of our questions. Thank you to all of our participants. We are excited to see you here. We hope to see you again. We will be in touch with the recording and resources that we've mentioned from this webinar. I will also check it to see what we might be able to do about a transcript for you all. If any questions, anything comes up, please feel free to reach out to us. You can always reach out to us at info@riveteducation.org. I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of their day. And again, thank you so much for joining us today.